Hi, this is Gaurav Gunjan, and you are watching me on the second video of the series Science of Camera. And today we are talking about image sensor. So in this block diagram of camera, you can see that image sensor is placed behind the lens configuration. Image sensor is very important for the camera, and the importance can directly be compared as the importance of human eye for a human. Without an image sensor, you cannot capture such a colorful image of an object in your camera. So let's go to the tool and see how these image sensors are created and the working principles of image sensor, that how it play with the light and convert that light to analog signal and digital signal and process the image further, store it into RSD card. If we go inside this image sensor, there are four layers that is present in image sensor. And the topmost layer is actually the microlenses. It's just directing the light correctly towards a particular photo sites. And the next layer is for color filter, and the third layer is most important layer, that is the photodiodes that actually converts the light into analog voltage. And the fourth layer, that is a high speed transfer circuitry that actually transfer those analog signals that is produced for every pixel to the outer circuitry. Most commonly you heard of these terms that most of the smartphone cameras and other cameras are using this backside illuminescence CMOS sensor. So when they say this, it is just like they just flip the placement of the high-speed transfer circuitry that initially used to be on top of the photodiodes, and now it is the bottom. So it is like being it at the top of the photodiodes, some light used to get reflect before it hits the photo sites, and as light is very important for any camera sensor to capture the image correctly, so it was somehow degrading the quality of image that initial camera used to capture. But with this backside illumination, it is more light efficient, and the more amount of light is hitting the photodiode, and we are able to capture the image more accurately, you can say. Okay, if you see the 3D view of image sensor, so image sensor is actually a group of pixels. When you hear the term like it is 12 megapixels, so it is 12 and into 10 to the power 6 pixels present in that. So it is actually a group of pixels, and each pixel has all these four separate layers present for that on a sensor. So in this sensor, now we have four major units. The first one is microlens. So it is microlens is actually a flat convex, so it is the top portion is convex and the lower portion is flat. And to have a more efficient directivity from these microlenses, they are using two layer of microlenses. As you can see here, that the first one is directing the light towards photo sites, and the later one is uh, directing it further, so that very less amount of light leakage will be there, because the more amount of light hit the photosensitive area of a pixel will be the more efficient performance we can see for that sensor. The next we have is a bare color filter array. It is just a group of color filters, and the matrix is like the number of green filters are equals to the sum of number of blue and red filters. Next one is photosensitive pixels and the high speed transfer circuit. So when we say the photosensitive pixels, that is the one convert the light into the electrons and the analog voltage, and the high speed transfer circuit further transfer those voltage to the outer circuit that further convert it into digital data, and that we will see in the next coming slides that I have prepared to explain the image sensors. So now you know that we have 4 layers: microlens, bare color filter array, and the photosensitive pixel, and the fourth layer is a high-speed transfer circuit, and each of them has their different role to play in that image sensor. Now before we go further into detail of the image sensor, that why they have those 4 layers, let's get into more details of why they are using the color filter in that image sensor. Why can't we just use direct just a micro lens to direct the light and just then convert the light into analog voltage? But image sensor without the color filter, it will be just the color blind, because what color we see on an object has a physics. When sunlight having a mix of all the wavelengths from 400 nanometer to 700 nanometer, each color has got its defined wavelengths. So when sun ray hit an object and we look at that object and we see a color in that object, right now you can see that this minion is looking yellow because it is not able to absorb the yellow color but absorb all other wavelengths. So when light ray of visible wavelength fall on an object, it absorbs all the wavelength except the one it reflects, and the color of the object is always same as the wavelength of the color that it is reflecting. It is not able to absorb. So the color that you repel is your color. So that's what is the physics of color, that why any object looks colorful to our eyes. To explain that color combinations in more detail, why in bare color filter they are using only red, green and blue filters? Why not all filters? Because they have to have a way to identify all the colors. So this circle explain that. As you can see that using green, yellow and blue, we can achieve all possible colors in the visible spectrum. As you can see here, that just by varying the amount of red, green and blue in our combination, we can achieve all the colors. At having equal amount of red and green, we can achieve yellow, and similarly we can have a magenta with the same amount of blue and red, and then the cyan with the same amount of green and blue. In other words, you can say when you have an object that is having a color of cyan, that means it is having a mixture of blue and green. So when it passes through a blue filter, it will give a blue ray. When it passes through the green filter, it will give the green ray. But when it passes through the red filter, it will not give any ray. It will not give any output, you can say. So that's what we see, that we're using red, green and blue. We will be achieving all possible colors for that object, and that's how the color filter work, giving a image sensor a way to identify the color, because image sensor itself is a color blind. So the 4 layers that you can see here, the first one is the micro lenses. Why it is called micro lens? Because it is having a diameter in micrometers. Then so when any light, you can say in any light in the visible spectrum is passing through these micro lenses, it just directed to the exact photosensitive area, then finally it hits the color filter, and color filter just not let any color pass through it. The physics behind the color filter is that it absorbs all the color and allow only the one color to pass through it, to penetrate it. So if it is a green filter, that means it will allow only green portion of that color to pass through it. So when it is cyan is passing through it, that means it will allow a green light to pass through. When a white light is passing through it, it will absorb all and allow only green to pass through it. So only green will be able to penetrate it. And when the green light finally hits the photosensitive area, as you can see that it finally produces the electrons, and these electrons is actually stored on a capacitor, and in the capacitor it will convert the charge to a voltage, and the voltage will further amplify through amplifier circuit, and amplifier circuit is also built on that pixel only. So on a pixel we have a photodiode, then an amplifier as well. Finally, the high-speed circuitry that we have seen, the fourth layer, high-speed circuit transfer circuit, that what it do, it just to read all the pixels, the amplified analog voltage from that pixel, and finally pass it to analog to digital converter. And analog to digital converter, what it do, you just convert the analog signal from that pixel into digital signal. So when it converts it into digital signal, it can use any number of bits to present any color. Like for JPG, it is using 8 bit to represent a color per pixel, and then the bits are passed to the processors, image processors, for further processing. And further processing is also very important in image processing, because there are so many further things like noise reduction and compression. There are so many things that it will do, and we will see that later when I go to the image processing section. Similarly, we can have a red filter, we can have a blue filter, and all. It's like a red filter. If you see that if cyan is passing through it, it will not allow any portion, because cyan is a combination of green and blue, so it will not allow any portion of the cyan pass through it. When a yellow color is passing through it, it will just allow the red portion of that color to pass through it. So it looks very interesting when you see that, okay, this is how the sensor works, that how they are able to filter out all other colors though. So if you are capturing a banana here, suppose, then from banana you have a yellow light coming, because banana is able to absorb all other colors and only letting the yellow color reflect from it. And if only yellow color is coming, then if it is passing through the green filter, it will allow the green portion of the yellow, and if it is passing through the red filter, it will allow the red portion of that yellow color. But when it passes through the blue filter, it will not allow any portion. And when the circuitry reads it and see that the neighboring green and red is having some electrons, some voltage there, but the blue is not having any voltage, it can somehow interpret, okay, so this is the spot where the yellow light is coming, because we don't have any blue portion, but we only have the green and red portion. So similarly, just by manipulating all those colors in the neighboring pixels, it is somehow able to calculate the color of object that is being captured. Similarly, you can see that here the green signal is coming, then it will not allow the green to pass through it, and it will only allow the blue portion of the cyan to pass through the blue filter. So this is how the different layers of an image sensor functions. Once we have that image captured in each pixel, now we have in a pixel of an analog voltage for each colors. So the next thing that comes in image capturing is reading those pixels and passing it to a SD card and store that image. So in between that reading of image sensor and storing it into the SD card, there are so many processing units that works hand in hand, and there are many mathematical calculations that comes before it finally produces the digital bits and store it into SD card. So when we have the image captured on a sensor and each pixel is having some corresponding voltage level at output, so it just start reading the first column of pixel one by one. So the first it will read the 1 then it will read this 2 it will go to the 3 and the 4 then 5 then the 7 so it will just keep reading one by one after other pixels, and once the first column is read, it will just shift to the next column, and the next clock that process is end, it will just start reading the next column of pixels. So this is how it read all the pixels, pixel values, and like transport it to outer circuits. So it's going like that until it just complete reading all the columns of that image sensor. So when it reads the amplified voltage of particular pixel, let's see how it processes that further. So let's suppose we are capturing an object which color is distributed among red and blue, and there is no any green value in that. So when we capture that image, the red filter will have some value, the blue filter will have some value, but the green will not have any color absorbed, and it will not have any bit value. So you can see here we are taking an example that R11 is having some bit value, blue 2 is having some bit value, but G21 and G12 is not having any bit value. For a red pixel, we need to calculate green and blue bit value. For a blue pixel, we need to calculate green and red value, and similarly for a green pixel, we have to calculate red and blue value. So there is when image processors come and it do such calculations. The image processor use some interpolation techniques looking at the brightness of the color recorded by the neighboring pixels. So the green 23 search for the blue color by looking at the pixels that is covered by blue filter like 24, 44, 42, 22. This is how they use the interpolation techniques and other mathematical techniques to find the RGB value of each pixel. So now, as we have already discussed that how image is captured and processed by a sensor and further the image processing unit, let's get back to the pixel. What is the pixel? So a pixel is a photosensitive area that absorbs the light and convert it to the analog voltage. So in a pixel there is a photosensitive area where when a light hit that photosensitive area, it actually generates some conducting electrons. That conducting electrons is actually stored on a capacitor, like CMOS sensor can have MOSFET as a capacitor, uh, and that is further amplified by the on pixel amplifier. And when I say the on pixel amplifier, that actually amplify that voltage generated and further transfer it to the analog to digital converter. So there are some switch is also present to read that pixel. So in a pixel we have a photodiode, we have an amplifier, and then we have a further circuitry to select the and read the voltage of that pixel. When we are discussing about image sensor, the basic thing that we have is basic unit of an image sensor is a pixel. So the biggest discussion that we more often hear is what is important, is it the number of megapixels that is present on a sensor, or it is the size of that pixel, or indirectly you can say the size of the sensor that is there. So let's see that what is important in a pixel. Let's consider the light ray that is hitting image sensor as bunch of light particles. Generally in terms of science we call it a photon. That actually defines the intensity of light. So the intensity of light will further decide that what number of electrons it will generate when it hits the fire like photodiode. And intensity of light in the general terms you can visualize like in the low light condition we have less intensity of light hitting our image sensor, and in the daylight condition more number of like photons hitting our image sensor, the intensity is high. So let's say that if when we have our image sensor not exposed to light, there is no any electrons, the connecting electron, and no voltage. I'm just not considering the opposite voltage and dark current that we say is one defect in image sensor. But let's say in no light condition, there is no any electron, so RGB value for the like all the pixels will be 0 at that time, because we don't have any voltage. So even if we read that pixel, there will be not be any bit value for any color. So once the exposure starts and light rays start hitting the photosensitive area, as you can see that the color filter is not allowing the red one, but it only allowing the green one, it's not allowing the blue one even. So it just keep hitting, and it just the electrons keep accumulating. As electrons keep accumulating, the value of corresponding digital level will keep increasing. As you can say that in 8-bit format we can have different levels from 0 to 255. So the value will keep increasing. So more and more exposure time is there, more and more number of light particles hitting that pixel and generating more and more electrons on that, and corresponding value of analog voltage. And as you see that we have different presentation, just to say now the maximum level of electrons when it is getting accumulated, the level of digital voltage will also increase, the digital level will also increase with the number of analog volt, with the number of electrons there, and that corresponding increasing the number of analog voltage that is being stored on a pixel. So we have a general formula that we can like derive here, that more number of electrons will directly represent the voltage that is generated, analog voltage, and that further decide that what will be the bit level of that pixel for any color. So in the low lights you see that less number of electrons will be generated by the light on that pixel, so it will be low bit level. And even in the low light, if we have a longer exposure time, we are allowing the light to hit that pixel for longer time, so it will be able to generate more number of electrons, and we can have desired bit level from that pixel. That's why we see that in the low light condition we generally keep our shutter speed low, it means the exposure time high, to get brighter image, to get high quality of image. Yeah, so the next thing is the size of photodiode, because the bigger the size of the photodiode is, larger the area of larger the photosensitive area, so it will allow the more number of light particles hit the photosensitive area per unit time. So for the smaller interval we can get the desired light value, like desired exposure of image on our image sensor for the larger photosensitive area. In a pixel, the number of electrons it can hold will also decide that what can be a level of exposure time we can have for that image sensor. So to get a more descriptive image, we do want to have the sensor, the pixels exposed for a longer duration. But if we have a pixel with a smaller size, it's just like a smaller bucket. If we have a bucket of smaller size, we can it can only hold a less number of bricks in it. But if you have a larger bucket, it can hold a larger number of bricks. Just similarly, you can correlate it with the pixel. It is just like the having a smaller pixel can hold smaller number of electron, right, and it will just get full for limited number of electrons, or you can say limited time of the exposure. But if we have a larger pixel, it will just allow the light to hit for a longer time, and that's what called in technical terms of camera, it calls the dynamic range of an image sensor. So having a more dynamic range gives it to capture high quality image, and then the high like a larger surface area will definitely give it better low light performance, because in the less time it is able to capture more light particles in it, and getting more depth of colors from that object. So this is how we can think of how the size of pixel is actually determining the depth of color that we are able to capture from an object, and even the low light condition, what will be the performance of camera, that will also be decided with the size of pixel that we are using. So now we can somehow conclude that the general perception for a smartphone camera that we see is like a higher the number of pixels is a better the camera quality will not be always true, because we have already seen that sensor size has similar role to play in deciding the image quality. So for a fixed sensor size, increasing the number of pixels definitely means that we are somehow reducing the size of the pixel, and reducing the size of pixel, reducing the dynamic range, and reducing the low light performance of a camera. So that's how we can visualize here that we have a sensor of having like 6 into 8. Then similarly we can have one pixel can hold here 3 into 5, 15 electrons per unit time. Unit time, when I say, we should be thinking in the microseconds, in the millisecond you can say. So in 1 millisecond it is able to hold 15 electrons. So for the 15 millisecond it will be able to hold 15 into 15 to 225 electrons. So for the less exposure time it is able to capture more electrons, and that means it is able to capture more depth of color. But if on the same size of sensor, if you are using the larger number of pixels, it will somehow reduce the size of pixel. So now you can see that the pixel is able to, one pixel is able to capture, let's say, 8 electrons per unit time it is per millisecond. So in 15 millisecond it is able to capture 120 electrons only. So the depth of color is somehow reducing with reducing the size of pixel. So that is what we see the impact of reducing the size of pixel. But definitely having a large number of pixels, we're able to capture a comparatively larger number of color spots, and we can have a larger number of bit definition for that. But that will not always decide the image quality. So the number of pixels and the size of pixel both work hand in hand to define the final image quality. Now, as we already discussed that what is the impact of having larger pixel size and larger sensor size, and what is the impact of having larger number of pixels on a camera. Let's see how the current day smartphones are using these characteristics in their camera. As you can see that currently we have Apple, Nokia, and HTC mainly focus on the size of pixel, but Samsung and Sony focus mainly on the number of pixel, and they advertise on the same ground. Apple iPhone 5s is one example that we can directly pick up here, that it is having a larger pixel size, and it is allowing it to absorb 33% higher amount of light compared to Apple iPhone 5. So that somewhere improves the image quality, and both of the camera is having the same number of megapixels. So that's how you see that is a perfect example of 5 and 5s. When you capture an image with iPhone 5 and iPhone 5s, you see the clear difference, and that difference is only coming because of the size of pixels that it has increased. This is the tabular chart where we have like collected all the current day cameras from a smartphone, and how they are having their sensor size and number of pixels that they are using. So here you can see that Nokia Lumia is having 1/3 inch diagonal sensors, and they are using 8.7 megapixel. Then HTC One M8, it is having 1/3 same sensor size, but it is having only 4 megapixels. So you can see here that the size of pixel is almost double than what being used by Nokia Lumia. And similarly, if you go with the Apple iPhone 6, 6 Plus and 5s, it is having the same sensor size, but it is having 8 megapixels. So the sensor size, like pixel size, is again half than what HTC One M8 is using. So HTC One M8, when you go in the specification, you will see that ultra pixel. So this is why they say it ultra pixel, because they are having the pixel size larger compared to other smartphone camera sensor pixels. So the Motorola Moto X is having larger like sensor size, and they are using 13 megapixels. Similarly, Samsung Note 4, I have been using Samsung Note 3, and it is having the same sensor size, that is 1 by 2.6 inch, and they have like 13, but it is having 16 megapixels, and it definitely provide a great quality of image that we see from all these smartphones. So this is how this sensor size and pixels being used with smartphone. And when if you are using one of them, you will definitely know that the one that your friend is using and the one that you are using, how the quality of images that differ.
So after all this technical discussion, we know that how the image sensor help camera to capture the colorful image of an object. And now we know as well that it's not always the number of pixels in a camera, but the size of pixel also matters, and the size of sensor also matters. So now I expect that whenever you are looking at the specifications of camera, you will look at all these specifications of the sensor size, pixel size, and number of megapixels, and it will help you better understand the quality of image that a camera can capture. For the dependency of other sensor size will be covered in the next video, so I hope you'll keep watching me on the next series of Science of Camera. Thank you. Bye bye.